Greetings and salutations. Robin Hood has returned. Hello. Amanda. Lovely show, darling. Thank you very much. That was fun. That was really fun. Yeah. Miss Patty Pinkstaff is here. Joanne King. Emily Thatcher, hello. Christina. Kelsey Blaine Gibson. My mom, Pam, is here. Dari is here, hello. Dawn Emery. Hello, Julie again. Melissa Catano, hi. All right, Terry Smith is going to sit back and just listen tonight. Hi, Terry. Angelica. Hello, hello, Angelica. Good, Don. Don managed 15 minutes of practice between the two shows. Awesome, man. That's exactly the way to get it through. Yeah. Very, very cool. As far as like practicing skills, music most particularly, but I think a lot of skills are this way. I find a lot more value in having, say, two 15-minute practice sessions rather than one 30-minute practice session, typically. There are going to be a lot of exceptions to that you'll find where just the setup and just like I wouldn't apply that to weightlifting, but there are a number of skills that I would say that lots and lots of short, manageable practice sessions add up really, really, really fast. It's a good approach. Yeah, well, and Don, not saying Amanda ran over, that was literally my fault. I wasn't kidding when I said on the show, she had this like schedule printed up on like a 5-minute by 5-minute by 5. Ask Hunter this at this point. We watch our video at this point. Ask Hunter this about this point. Talk about Fireside Tales. Ask, it's like that. Yeah, that was just me going on. So she exhibited some superhuman skills of time management there. Going to open this evening with a poem and 2.4 ounces of Jameson. Emily, almost have the Harry Potter theme down on the ukulele. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Good. Yeah, she didn't factor in Hunter time. Exactly. Yeah. Ask him a simple question, you'll get a long answer. Ask him a complex question like who are your favorite musicians or favorite musical styles, and wow, yeah. Hello, Anna. And Amanda just chimed in. Yes, the paper actually did say approximate schedule. That she is not just retrofitting that. She is not begging the question or shoehorning in some sort of ex post facto. Damn, whiskey brings out the Latin in me. All right. So I want to start tonight's Fireside Tales with Wolfgang number 37. This is called An Introduction to Poetry by Billy Collins. Now, so this guy was born in 1941, and he was appointed the Poet Laureate of the United States from 2001 to 2003. I'm really curious. Who appoints the Poet Laureate? I think it's supposed to be a presidential thing, but not that I'm going to delve into politics now. George W. Bush, I think his detractors as well as his loyal base to this day would agree on one thing: not a big poetry guy. I don't see that happening. I'm not sure. So really curious about that. But yeah, Billy Collins, United States Poet Laureate from 2001 to 2003. So the context of what I'm about to read here is, if you've ever seen the Dead Poets Society, they made poetry like really, really stuffy and intellectual. Not that it's not deserving of being an intellectual pursuit, but particularly like in English educational systems, you would have people literally making a graph on a chalkboard of a poem's like eloquence versus its emotional impact, and they literally like graph these things out. And so you've got to imagine that as the backdrop for this opening poem. This is called Introduction to Poetry by Billy Collins. I asked them to take a poem and hold it up to the light like a color slide, or press an ear against its hive. I say, drop a mouse into a poem and watch him probe his way out, or walk inside the poem's room and feel the walls for a light switch. I want them to water ski across the surface of a poem, waving at the author's name on the shore. But all they want to do is tie the poem to a chair with a rope and torture a confession out of it. They begin beating it with a hose to find out what it really means. Oh, Billy Collins. Yeah. Okay, so one more poem before the first short story of the evening. I've read some things of Khalil Gibran in Fireside Tales Past. We're huge, Christy Davila, they're huge Robin Williams fans in the Davila house. Lovely, lovely. Have I ever read any Walt Whitman on this show? Wow, I thought I had read something from The Leaves of Grass in an early Fireside Tales, but maybe I have not read any Walt Whitman. Okay, somebody remind me. Walt Whitman possibly for next week. So in the past I've read some Khalil Gibran, who was a Lebanese-American poet, artist, and a philosopher. His best-known work is a book called The Prophet, and here's a really good quote. The appearance of things changes according to the emotions, and thus we see magic and beauty in them, while the magic and beauty are really in ourselves. I love that encapsulation. All of that can be applied to good science fiction. Good science fiction from a modern context should be some sort of declaration on modern society or some present circumstance, maybe projected to a utopian or a dystopian end, or maybe in some kind of crazy parallel. So this is a poem by Khalil Gibran called Fear. It is said that before entering the sea, a river trembles with fear. She looks back at the path she has traveled from the peaks of the mountains, the long winding road crossing forests and villages, and in front of her, she sees an ocean so vast that to enter, there seems nothing more than to disappear forever. But there is no other way. The river cannot go back. Nobody can go back. To go back is impossible in existence. The river needs to take the risk of entering the ocean because that's where the river will know. It's not about disappearing into the ocean, but of becoming the ocean. Wow. Thank you. Thank you, Khalil. It reminds me of a quote I came across in my high school modern fiction class. I don't know who this quote is attributed to, or if it's even known. Maybe it's anonymous. Somebody's going to Google this and put it in the chat, I hope. But there's a wonderful quote that just very simply states, "You can't go home again." When I was a teenager, it took me a little while to wrestle with that because I had only teenage experiences to measure it against. But looking back at the backdrop of what I already considered to be some nostalgic preschool memories and childhood camping trips, like, yeah, you can't recreate some of that stuff. All right. So, we've got two short stories for you this evening. No, Dari, I have not seen Cinema Paradiso. I would like to see that. Thomas Wolfe. It's in a novel by Thomas Wolfe. Okay, that sounds... That does not sound wrong to me. So I'm going to read you all a story by Irvin S. Cobb. This guy was born in 1876, died 1944. This actual story was published in 1921. Now, what I find remarkable about this particular story is several things. It's just kind of funny and whimsical to begin with. But this story takes place in the exact spot that my dad and I have backpacked through and camped together, which is the Grand Canyon. And this story mentions a couple of places in the Grand Canyon that are absolutely real. None of the geography of this is made up. This kind of reminds me a little bit of a Dan Brown novel. If you know that name, he wrote The Da Vinci Code. He wrote Angels and Demons. There were a few other like historical conspiracy theory fiction kinds of things. You know, back when conspiracy theories were like still cool and not like scary. Oh my God, it's going to overthrow the government. Don't believe this. The Da Vinci Code was, back when conspiracy theories were just silly, like 15 years ago. What Dan Brown does really, really cool, really well with the Da Vinci Code, Angels and Demons, and several of other of his novels is every single one he paints environments as though he's been there, because he has, and he's taken copious notes. The guy would just like walk around, I suppose, with a notebook, and maybe he would write some of his stories while he was literally in the museum. I don't know. I've never heard him specify in an interview or otherwise. But Dan Brown makes page-turner, pot-boiler, pulp fiction novels painting these brilliant environments where you can just feel like what it was like to be there. To make my second Robin Williams reference, unwittingly in a single evening. In Good Will Hunting, he looks at Ben Affleck and says, now, you're a very bright and intelligent kid. You've read a lot. But I bet you can't tell me what the Sistine Chapel smells like. If you read a Dan Brown novel, you'll get an entertaining, if somewhat silly, kind of contorted story, but you'll know from turning a few of those pages, at least you'll think you'll know what the Sistine Chapel smells like. Irvin S. Cobb does the same thing, in that he has definitely been to the Grand Canyon. He talks about the Bright Angel Trail. That's real. He talks about the Hermit Trail. That is very concisely, specifically real. Irvin Shrewsbury Cobb was an American author, humorist, editor, columnist from Paducah, Kentucky. Moved to New York in 1904. He's probably one of the most interesting authors you've never heard of. He wrote for the New York World, which is Joseph Pulitzer's newspaper. Even if you never heard of that newspaper, I bet you've heard of Pulitzer. And Cobb was the highest paid staff reporter in the United States. He wrote 60 books, more than 60 books, more than 300 short stories. Several of his works were adapted for silent movies. He wrote other movies, including the Jackie Coogan movie. He wrote an early Cary Grant film in 1933. One of his stories was adapted for the film called The Woman Accused. Yeah, young Cary Grant. So with the advent of sound, like more and more stuff happened for him eventually. Cobb acted in 10 motion pictures and hosted the 7th Academy Awards in 1935. Okay, this is a funny one. After the repeal of Prohibition, Frankfurt Distilleries recruited him to compile a recipe book just to remind consumers who were out of practice how to mix a good drink. So he published a book of mixed drinks. Okay, this is my favorite detail. In the midst of covering the 1920 Democratic Convention, Cobb received about 1.5% of the votes on the 23rd presidential ballot. Just like people liked him better than either of the candidate, and they just wrote his name in on their ballot. He was an inspiration for H.P. Lovecraft. The Call of Cthulhu, H.P. Lovecraft, that's that guy. Cobb wrote some short stories in the horror genre. Wow, I've already gone way too long just giving this guy a prelude. I'm gonna have to go over my pages of prelude for how interesting this guy is. He's almost as interesting as Will, who is logged in on the chat as Deep Sky Dude. Anybody that's got an astronomy handle. What's up, man? Glad to see you join us, man. So, with no further ado, this first short story is called The Hydrophobic Skunk by Irvin S. Cobb. The hydrophobic skunk, which resides at the extreme bottom of the Grand Canyon, is the rarest of living creatures, except perhaps for any Southern liberal politician who never asked for a federal office. This skunk is so rare that nobody ever saw him. That is, nobody except a native. I met plenty of tourists who had seen people who had seen one, but never a tourist who had seen one with his own eyes. In addition to being rare, he's highly gifted. I think almost anybody will agree with me that the common ordinary skunk has been most richly dowered by nature. To adorn a skunk with any extra qualifications seems as a great waste of the raw material as painting the lily or gilding refined gold. He's already amply equipped for outdoor pursuits. Nobody intentionally shoves him around. Everybody gives him as much room as he seems to need. The skunk commands respect. Nay, more than that, respect and veneration wherever he goes. Joyriders never run him down on purpose, and foot passengers avoid crowding him into a corner. You would think nature had done amply well by the skunk, but no. The hydrophobic skunk comes along and upsets all these calculations. Besides carrying the traveling credentials of an ordinary skunk, he is rabid in the most rabidissimous form. He's not mad just part of the time, like one's relatives by marriage, like one's in-laws. He's not mad most of the time, like the old-fashioned railroad ticket agent, but mad all of the time. Incurably, enthusiastically, and unanimously mad. He is mad, and he is glad of it. We made the acquaintance of the hydrophobic skunk when we rode down the Hermit Trail. The casual visitor to the Grand Canyon, first of all, takes the rim drive. Then he essays Bright Angel Trail, which is sufficiently scary for his purposes until he gets used to it. By the way, I categorically agree. Now, maybe this is after Roosevelt's New Deal, but the Bright Angel Trail is like broad and wide, and yeah, there's like a dramatic drop, but it's like it's not like a vacuum cleaner is pulling you toward it or anything like that. I don't find it scary, but it might have looked different in 1921. I'm not sure. So, the casual visitor to the Grand Canyon essays the Bright Angel Trail, which is sufficiently scary for his purpose until he gets used to it. And after that, he grows more adventurous and tackles the Hermit Trail, which is a marvel of corkscrew convolutions, gimleting its way down the red abdominal wound of a canyon to the very gizzard of the world. Here, Johnny, our guide, felt moved to speech, and we hearkened to his words and hungered for more. For Johnny knows the ranges of the Northwest as a city dweller knows his own little side street. In the fall of the year, Johnny comes down to the Grand Canyon and serves as a guide a while. And then, when he gets so he just can't stand associating with tourists any longer, he packs his war bags and journeys back to the northern range and enjoys the company of cows for a spell. Cows are not exactly exciting, but they don't ask foolish tourist questions. A highly competent young person is Johnny, and a cow puncher of parts. Most of the canyon guides are cow punchers, accomplished ones too, and of high standing in the profession. With a touch of reverence, Johnny pointed out to us Sam Scoville, the greatest bronco buster of his time, now engaged in piloting tourists. "Can he ride?" echoed Johnny in answer to our question. Scoville could ride an earthquake if she stood still long enough for him to mount. He rode steamboat, not young steamboat, but old steamboat. He rode rocking chair, and he's the only man that ever did that and was not called on in a couple of days to attend his own funeral. So, we went on at a lazy mule trot, hearing the unwritten annals of the range from one who had seen them enacted at first hand. Pretty soon, we had passed a herd of burros with dusty noses and spotty hides, feeding on prickly pears and rock lichens, and just before sunset, we slid down the last declivity out upon the plateau and came to a camp. And this was a camp. Side note, this camp that they were referring to does not exist any longer, but I do know the plateau that they're referring to where it was located. In fact, there are still building foundations down there you can see the ruins and remains of. This was roughing it deluxe, with a most deluxe-y vengeance. Here were 3 tents, or rather 3 canvas houses with wooden half walls, and they were spick and span inside and out, had glass windows in them and doors and matched wooden floors. The mess tent was provided with a table with a clean cloth to go over it, and there were china dishes and china cups and shiny knives, forks, spoons. Bill was in charge of the camp. A dark, rangy, good-looking leading man of a cowboy wearing his blue shirt and his red neckerchief with an air. That Johnny certainly could cook. Served on china dishes upon a cloth-covered table, we had mounds of fried steaks and shoals of fried bacon and a bushel, more or less, of shepherdor potatoes and green peas and sliced peaches out of cans and sourdough biscuits as light as kisses and much more filling, and fresh butter and fresh milk and coffee as black as your hat and strong as sin. How easy it is for civilized man to become primitive and comfortable in his way of eating, especially if he's just ridden 10 miles on a buckboard and 9 more on a mule and is away down at the bottom of the Grand Canyon, and there's nobody to look on disapprovingly when he takes a bite that would be credit to a steam shovel. Hunter's note on this point: I've done that hike without aid of a burro or a mule, and while carrying a heavy-ass backpack, probably 40 or 50 pounds, and to this day, one of the memorable best meals of my life was at the bottom of the Bright Angel Trail. Dad and I had put in on the east side of the canyon, hiked across to come out the Bright Angel Trail on the west side, and I think after 4 days, we came to the camp at the bottom of the Bright Angel Trail called Phantom Ranch. There, I had one of the most incredible steaks of my entire life, because it was the first real non-dehydrated meal that I had had in all that time of carrying a big heavy load through a very difficult, challenging ecosystem. So, despite all reports to the contrary, I wish to state that it is no trouble at all to eat green peas off a knife blade. You merely mix them with potatoes for a cement, mix it with fried steak, take it from an old steak eater. Tastes best when eaten with those tools of nature's own providing, both your hands and your teeth. An hour passed, busy yet pleasant, and we were both gorged to the gills and had reared back with our cigarettes lit to enjoy a third jorum of black coffee apiece, when Johnny, speaking in an offhand way to Bill, who was still hiding away biscuits inside of himself like a parlor prestidigitator, said, "So, you seen any of them old hydrophobies in the last day or two?"
Nah, not so many,"
said Bill casually.
"There was a couple out last night rooting around in the moonlight, I reckon, though. There'll be quite a flock of them out tonight. New moon always seems to fetch 'em up fresh from the river." Both of us quit blowing on our coffee, and we put the cups down. I think I was the one who spoke. I beg your pardon? I asked. But, what did you say would be out tonight? Oh, we was just speaking to one another about them hydrophobic skunks, said Bill, apologetically. This here canyon is where they mostly hang out and frolic around. I laid down my cigar, too. I admit, I was interested. Oh, I said softly, like that. Is it? Do they? Go on. Yeah, said Johnny. I reckon there's liable to be one come shoving his old nose into that door in a minute. Or probably two that most travels in pairs. Sets, as you might say. And you'd know the minute you saw them, though, said Bill. They're smaller than a regular skunk and spotted where the other kind of stripy. And they got little red eyes. You won't have no trouble at all recognizing one. It was at this juncture that we both got up and moved back by the stove. It was warmer there, and the chill of the evening seemed to be settling down noticeably. Funny thing about hydrophobic skunks, went on Johnny after a moment of pensive thought. They're mad, you know. What makes them mad? The two of us asked the question together. Oh, they're just born that way, explained Bill. Mad from the start and won't never do nothing to get it shut off of it. They never attack humans, I suppose. Don't they? Said Johnny, as if surprised at such ignorance. Why, humans is their favorite pastime. Humans is just pie to a hydrophobic skunk. It ain't really any fun to be bit by a hydrophobic skunk, neither. He raised his cup of coffee to his lips and imbibed deeply. Which, you certainly said something then, Johnny, said Bill. You see, he went on, turning to us, they aim to catch you asleep. And they creep up right soft and take hold of you. They take hold of your ear, usually. They clamp their teeth, and they just hang on for further orders. Some say they hang on till thunders, same as snapping turtles do. But that's a lie, I judge, because there's weeks on a stretch down here when it won't thunder. All the cases I ever heard of, they usually let go at sunup. And it's right painful at the time, said Johnny, taking up the thread of the narrative. And then, in 9 days, you go mad yourself. Remember that fella the hydrophobic skunk bit down here by the rapids, Bill? Let's see now, what was that hombre's name? Williams, supplied Bill. Heck, Williams. I saw him at Flagstaff when they took him there to the hospital. That guy certainly did carry on regardless. First he went mad and his eyes turned red. Then he got so he didn't have no real use for water. Well, them prospectors don't never care much about water anyway, and then he got weird. Then he got snapping and biting and foaming, so they had to strap him down to his bed. He got loose, though. Broke loose, I suppose, I said. No. He bit loose, said Bill, with an air of one who would not deceive you even in a matter of small details. Do you mean to say he bit those leather straps in two? No, sir. He couldn't reach them, explained Bill. So he bit the bed in two. I mean, not in one bite, of course, he went on. Took him several. I saw him after he was laid out. He really wasn't no credit to himself as a corpse. I'm not sure, but I think my companion and I were holding hands by now. Outside, we could hear that little lost echo laughing to itself. There's no time to be laughing, either. Under certain circumstances, I don't know of a lonelier place anywhere on Earth than that Grand Canyon. Presently, my friend spoke, and it seemed to me his voice was a mite husky. I mean, he had a bad cold. You said they were mostly attacked persons who are sleeping outside, didn't you? Yeah, that's right, too, said Johnny. And Bill nodded in affirmation. Then, of course, since we sleep indoors, everything will be just fine, I put in. Well, yes and no, answered Johnny. In the early part of the evening, a hydrophobia is liable to do a lot of prowling around outdoors. But toward morning, they like to get into camps. They dig up onto the sidewalls. Maybe they come up through the floor. And they seem to prefer to get in bed with you. They're cold-blooded, I reckon. Same as rattlesnakes. Cool nights always do drive 'em in, seems like. Yeah, it's going to be sort of coolish tonight, said Bill, casually. And it certainly was. I don't remember a chillier night in years. My teeth were chattering just a little from the cold before we turned in. I retired with all my clothes on, including my boots, my leggings, and I wished I had brought along my earmuffs. I also buttoned my watch into my left-hand shirt pocket, the idea being if for any reason I should conclude to move during the night, I'd be fully equipped for traveling. The door would not stay closely shut. The jamb had sagged a little and the wind kept blowing the door ajar. But after a while, we dozed off. It was 1:27 a.m. when I woke with a violent start. I know this was the exact time because that was when my watch stopped. I peered about me in the darkness. The door was wide open. Down on the floor, there was a dragging, scuffling sound. And from almost beneath me, a pair of small red eyes peered up phosphorescently. It's here, I said to my companion as I emerged from my blankets, and he, waking instantly, seemed instinctively to know whom I meant. I used to wonder at the ease with which a cockroach can climb a perfectly smooth wall and run across the ceiling. I know now that to do this is the easiest thing in the world if you have the proper incentive behind you. I had gone up one wall of the tent and had crossed over and was in the act of coming down the other side when Bill burst in, his eyes blurred with sleep, a lighted lamp in one hand and a gun in the other. I was never so disappointed in my life because it wasn't a hydrophobic skunk at all. It was a pack rat, sometimes called a trade rat, paying us a visit. The pack rat, or trade rat, is also a denizen of the Grand Canyon. He's about 4 times as big as an ordinary rat and has an appetite to correspond. He sometimes invades your camp and makes free with your things, but he never steals anything outright. He merely trades with you, hence his name. He totes off a side of meat or a bushel of meal and brings a cactus stalk in. Or he'll confiscate your saddlebags and leave you in exchange a nice dry chip. He's honest, but from what I can gather, he never gets badly struck on a deal. Next morning at breakfast, Johnny and Bill were doing a lot of laughing between them over something or other. Yeah. My mom's editing note, these were dudes on a snipe hunt. Yes, indeed. So I'm just now glancing up in the chat the suggestion of maybe we can convince him to do an earlier special kids edition sometime. Yeah, Trade Rat would be a cool band name indeed. Okay, so I think I'm going to save this Stephen Crane story for next week because it's a bit longer. It's going to take longer to read than I was planning on going tonight. However, I kind of want to go back. I want to do some more justice to this character, this Irvin S. Cobb guy. Because this guy is just, the guy that wrote this story, he's just really, really captured my imagination. This guy is just a fascinating dude. So I mentioned before reading that story that this guy was an inspiration of H.P. Lovecraft. Again, to reiterate, Lovecraft wrote The Call of Cthulhu, the big cuttlefish-faced monster, the big octopus. Oh, Jesus! All of a sudden, all the cephalopods are just escaping my pronunciation. Yeah, Cthulhu is an elder god who lives under the sea and comes from either the outskirts of the solar system or beyond. It's never really clarified. H.P. Lovecraft did some things in fiction. He virtually invented horror sci-fi. He was writing a lot of his stuff in the 1930s and setting a lot of his stuff in the late 1800s in a fictitious town in New England. But the relevance of all of this is that Cobb also wrote short stories in the horror genre, such as one in 1911 called Fishhead, one in 1923 called The Unbroken Chain. Fishhead has been cited as an inspiration for H.P. Lovecraft's The Shadow over Innsmouth, which I've considered reading on this show several times, while The Unbroken Chain was a model for Lovecraft's The Rats in the Walls. The former was described by Lovecraft as banefully effective in its portrayal of unnatural affinities between a hybrid idiot and the strange fish of an isolated lake. All of this was published in an essay called Supernatural Horror in Literature. Cobb wrote a letter detailing his desired funeral arrangements. I'm going to read part of that letter to you here. I'm going to remind you, this is the guy that covered the 36th presidential election, or as a staff writer, as a reporter, and he ended up getting something like 1.5% of the votes himself because he was just that charismatic by comparison to the actual candidates. He just wasn't even running. He got that on a write-in. Yo, what's up, Paul Carganilla? Yeah, Stephen Crane is we're gonna have to give him his due and come back to him next week, because the Stephen Crane story, I do not want to rush this. It is a really, really endearing, lovely story. So Cobb wrote a letter detailing his desired funeral arrangements. Here's part of the document, at least. Above all, I want no long faces and no show of grief at the burying ground. Kindly observe the final wishes of the undersigned and avoid reading the so-called Christian burial service, which, in view of the language employed in it, I regard as one of the most cruel and paganish things inherited by our forebears from our remote pagan ancestors. In deference to the faith of our dear mother, who was through her lifetime a loyal, though never bigoted communicant of that congregation, perhaps the current pastor of the First Presbyterian Church would consent to read the 23rd Psalm, which was her favorite passage in the Scriptures, and is mine, since it contains no charnel words, no morbid mouthings about corruption and decay, and, being mercifully without creed or dogma, carries no threat of eternal hellfire for those parties we do not like, nor direct promise of a heaven, which, if one may judge by the people who are surest of going there, must be a powerfully dull place, populated to a considerable and uncomfortable degree by prigs, time servers, and unpleasantly aggressive individuals. Hell may have a worse climate, but undoubtedly the company is sprightlier. The Catholics, with their genius for stage management, handle this detail better. The officiating clergyman speaks in Latin, and the parishioners, being unacquainted with that language, are impressed by the majesty of the rolling, sonorous periods without being shocked by distressing allusions and harrowing references. I love his take on I love his take on different branches of Christianity that in Catholic dogma there was a place they just referred to as limbo for a time, and this Cobb refers to, I'm sure, is what he was referring to. The Catholics, with their genius for stage management, handle this detail better. It's okay. Now I've got to look up. So Paul would have a true celebration of life. Christina said, was that Christina? That was Christina. Paul said, I hope so. If it doesn't happen, I'll haunt the fuck out of y'all. Yeah. Paul's going to Zoom bomb us all from beyond the grave. There's going to be a deep cuts in every show of every week of everybody's channel, whether they volunteer for it or not. Oh, dear. Wolfgang is looking for water, and he's only going to find my glass of whiskey. Here, buddy. Here you go. There. All right. So we're going to close out this evening with a few more poems. One more by Khalil Gibran. This poem is called Let These Be Your Desires by Khalil Gibran. Love has no other desire but to fulfill itself. But if your love must needs have desires, let these be your desires. To melt and be like a running brook that sings its melody to the night. To know the pain of too much tenderness. To be wounded by your own understanding of love, and to bleed willingly and joyfully. To wake at dawn with a winged heart and give thanks for another day of loving. To rest at the noon hour and meditate love's ecstasy. To return home at eventide with gratitude. and then to sleep with a prayer for the beloved in your heart and a song of praise upon your lips. Yeah. And just because I felt seasonally inappropriate, we have two more poems on winter. This first is by D.H. Lawrence. This is called A Winter's Tale. Yesterday the fields were only gray with scattered snow, and now the longest grass leaves hardly emerge. Yet her deep footsteps mark the snow and go on toward the pines at the hill's white verge. I cannot see her, since the mist's white scarf obscures the dark wood and the dull orange sky, but she's waiting, I know, impatient and cold, half sobs struggling into her frosty sigh. Why does she come so promptly when she must know that she's only the nearer to the inevitable farewell? The hill is steep on the snow, my steps are slow. Why does she come when she knows what I have to tell? God, I don't know how it goes, but I really want to convert that into song lyrics. Yeah. D.H. Lawrence. So I've got one more short poem. And let me ask you all a question, just out in the chat. Will this be interesting? I was thinking about doing a short biography on people that I know of their work and respect. Like, here's a little blurb on an astronomer that you've never heard of, possibly. Here is what we literally know about the solar system, maybe the universe, because of what this astronomer did. Or, again, I will not turn this into any kind of political diatribe, but Anthony Fauci might be a really interesting thing to give you all a 5-minute, like, who is this guy? Why do we all know his name? News and politics aside. What is it that he's contributed to science that put him in the place that he's in today, or was in last year, more appropriately? I think I'm really fascinated because, and I'll reiterate that avoiding politics, I've heard a lot of people on Facebook, for example, social media, even just in grocery stores, denigrating Fauci in particular, that he's just in it for the China money, or, just whatever crazy conspiracy theory you want to throw in there. And that, like hashtag fire Fauci. And to these people, I want to know, do you know the first thing about the man? Do you know where he graduated university? Do you know what his specialties are? Do you know what he has contributed to science up till now? I bet not, but I'm not going to engage random strangers in debate. Obviously. I've been looking for a way to tell the story of how Mary Shelley came to write Frankenstein. And what I'm now suggesting, I'm suddenly realizing might just be the vehicle for that. So, yeah, this requires a little more sanding as a concept, some smoothing of the corners and edges, but yeah, if enough people are interested, I think just a couple of biographic details of some of these people, showing them as real human beings, could be compelling and unique. So with that, I'm going to bring you one more poem. This is called Winter Branches by Margaret Vidmere. When wintertime grows weary, I lift my eyes on high and see the black trees standing, stripped clear against the sky. They stand there very silent, with the cold, flushed sky behind. The little twigs flare beautiful and restful and kind. Clear-cut and certain they rise with summer past, for all that trees can ever learn they know now at last. Slim and black and wonderful, with all unrest gone by, the stripped tree boughs comfort me, drawn clear against the sky. And with that last poem also concludes my 2.4 ounces of Jameson. So, a week and a half until a lot of us meet a lot of us in person, face to face. The Vaudacity family reunion is encroaching next, let's see, yeah, a week from Friday, a week from Saturday, July 2nd and 3rd. It's the most measured Jameson drinking I've ever witnessed. Emily Thatcher, I can't wait to meet you in person also, darling. Thank you. Thank you so much. Let's see. We've got 2 different shows on Vaudacity tomorrow night, as I recall. They're the podcast is Tuesday, and Christina, do you know what the other show is on Tuesday tomorrow? Sorry?
Dari show.
I thought Dari was Wednesday. Dari's always Tuesday. No wonder I can't remember then what's on Wednesday. What's on Wednesday?
Picker's Circle.
The Picker's Circle is on Wednesday, which I thought was Tuesday. So never mind any of my disclaimers of confusion. Yeah, join us tomorrow on the Vaudacity Network for the podcast after Dari's Zumba show. And on Wednesday, the Picker's Circle with Mike and Nicole Pierce. I got a view that they were learning OBS from Sam, and never mind the technicalities of what all that means. They're going to be pushing buttons all on their own very soon. And then, of course, this next Lovecast is going to be a very special one. I'm going to have my second in-person guest, bass player for Hunter and the Dirty Jacks. We'll see if he even has to pick up a bass even once. Talk about a multi-instrumentalist. This guy is like, if it's stringed and even vaguely resembles a guitar, this guy is already a master at it. Aaron Barnes is going to be joining me for this Thursday's Lovecast at 6 o'clock. And thank you, David. I am on Thursday. I will not forget.
In any case, thank you all very much for joining us this evening. Have a lovely tomorrow. Oh, and yeah, I don't point this out nearly gratuitously enough, but right here under my right hand, we have the virtual tip jar. Paymo. Jesus. That was the 0.4. Yeah, thank you, Christina. Now she's just giggling back there. Look at, she's about to cackle. I know it's going to happen. Paymo and Venpal, all the virtual tip jar things are down here. Oh, and Paul Carganilla is going to do this Sunday. He's going to do a very special Sunday night episode of Deep Cuts. All right. All right. Thank you all for joining us. I love you all. See you Thursday.